In this video, we are returning to our simple username generator HTML JavaScript page to add various features to make it a bit better. So one sort of simple thing that we won't see much of the effect of, but is something that we should be doing, is that when we have a label sort of instructing the user what to do in terms of some input, then we should make an explicit connection between the label and the input. And so our inputs have an ID, and we make the connection between the label and the input explicit by using the for attribute of the label element. And so we have the input has an ID, and we use the for of the label, and we make it equal to that ID of the associated label, and that makes that connection more explicit. And it won't affect the way the page looks, but it may affect the functioning if, say, someone were using a screen reader, so it makes for better accessibility. So I wanted to add that in and do a better job in terms of accessibility. And it's helping me here by prompting me. It knows a for matches an ID. So when I say for, it gives me some of the IDs. So now I have made that association for my label for the first name, the last name, and the number. Okay. Now we mentioned that you recall what this program looked like. The user enters a first name, a last name, a favorite number, and it generates an ID, a username from that. And then we mentioned the previous time certain possible extensions that we did not do, but now let's go and do some of them. So what if the person had a space, and at the end of that entry, and maybe a space at the beginning of this entry? What would that do? Then those spaces would end up as part of the username, and we don't want that. Okay. So we're going to sort of do a Google search and find some solution. So we'll be doing that kind of programming. And it helps if we know the sort of right words. So first of all, let's provide a context, and you can see it already there. JavaScript trim. What we want to do, the action we want is a trim. We want to trim any white space off of the string that we've made, and we want to do this within the context of JavaScript. So usually when we're searching, we like some overall context, and then what we're trying to look up within that context. And there are sort of two places that I often go to when I'm searching for something. And if it is sort of an intro thing, I often like the W3 schools. It will provide me a sort of a code example, and maybe even a place to sort of play around with that code example without yet sort of online place to play without putting it into my program just yet. And another place, if it's sort of a more sophisticated question, then I often end up on a site called Stack Overflow. But so I like the W3 schools, and the W3 school link popped up, so I'm going to head to that one. And this used to be more complicated, a trim, but it is now just the word trim. So they say here they create some text. It has some space at the beginning, some space at the end, and then they are trimming it. So that, and then they give us here the chance to display it, to do it ourselves. So they're displaying the text and then the results. So the text had the spaces, and down here we've gotten rid of the space in the front and the end. There's still some space in the middle. That is different, but trim will take a space at the beginning or the end. Okay, so that's one thing we want to get rid of those spaces. So I'm going to take my first and trim it. So I could make a new variable, or I can just reuse my first variable. So that's what I'm going to use. So this assignment statement, line 23 now, says we always sort of start when thinking about what an assignment statement does. We sort of start on the right and then move towards the left. So it says after the equal sign, it says take our variable first, which is we got from the text first input. And we are going to trim it, take off any of the white space at the beginning or the end, and then we're going to sort of reassign that value that is now trimmed back to our first variable. And let's do that with last as well. And now we don't need to do it with the number. I believe we should not be able to type numbers in the number box. So let's now say Thomas with a space at the end, maybe 2, and 1 with a space at the beginning, and my favorite number. I'm trying spaces there and weren't typing it, and then I'll hit username, and we see there's we've gotten rid of the spaces. So that was the trim. We've succeeded in trimming our white space off of the beginning and the end of any of the user input in the text inputs. Okay. One of the other possibilities that we mentioned was that username is not case sensitive, so we don't really care if we have capital letters in there. But let's move all of whatever the user enters into lower case. So again, we're going to search, going to close that, go back to Google, and say JavaScript this time, case. And let's see, there is switch case, so that is not what I want. So let's try to do a better search, letter case, or maybe capitalize or small. There was Stack Overflow. Here is W3 schools. Again, I usually in intro stuff like W3 schools, but we did see up there Stack Overflow, which is another common place, but I usually look there for the harder things. This isn't too hard. So here is JavaScript string toLowerCase. And so again, we can look at the example, and it's going to take hello world and then put it into lowercase, so that capital H and capital W should be now small. And then I can change this code over here if I want and rerun it. This is good enough for me, toLowerCase. So let's come back here and again add and I could chain these things together and sort of do it all at once, but I am going to sort of take my time and do it one thing at a time. toLowerCase. I believe that was it. Small t, capital L, capital C, open close parenthesis. Let's check. toLowerCase. So, and do the same thing for the last name. Okay, let's save that. Now, again, run it. And now I have my capital letters in my name, but I should be getting rid of those. So I have now replaced the any capital letters with small letters, and I can do in just 2 uppercase if I wanted it all capitals. Okay, what else might I want to do? I might want to take the first name and have the user enter the first name, but then I'll say I only want the initial. So I want to take just that first letter. And that's known as a substring. So I'm sort of making life a little bit easier than it normally is, in that sort of I know the right words to search these things. So searching can be difficult if you don't know the right words. For instance, when I showed case, I was getting the wrong thing. And then I needed to specify that it was the case of letters and not a case of a situation. Like there are different cases that could occur if you have different scenarios. And that's what I was first finding. But now what I want to search is I wanted to get the initial, and I happen to know that that's known as a substring. So that is going to make our life easy, just to know that word. Again, here's W3 schools. And then we have this result here. Let's try it for ourselves. This one maybe I will play with. They are doing substring 1.4. They started off with hello world and they got L. Okay, so we have to understand these parameters, the 1 and the 4. And if we scroll down below and look for an explanation, it's going to tell us that these are both indices. These are positions of the letters. So sometimes substring in other languages will have a position and a length, but in JavaScript, it's 2 positions. And they gave us a 1, and that was the second letter. So the other thing to note is that it's 2 indices or 2 positions, but that the positions start with 0. That is common in programming languages, that when you have a bunch of things, that the first one is the 0, not 1, but 0. And so we want to grab, say, just that first initial. In our example, we would want the H. So we want it to start at 0, not at 10, but at 0. And then this index, the second, is the index the first index that we don't want. So we want index 0, we don't want index 1. Let's run that. There's our H. There's our first initial. So again, I'll pick on first and say, what was it? Substring. And then we wanted 0, 1. We wanted to start at the first position 0, and then at position 1, we wanted it to stop. This will give us the first initial. And there we have it, just the first initial. What else might we want to do that's still relatively simple? We might have some people have last names that have spaces in them or have hyphens in them, and we might not want those in our username. We probably don't. And that is something that we will want to replace. And replace came up as an alternative to trim. So there was the simple trim, and we used it and it worked. It did what we wanted, but it also mentioned in there replace. And so replace was a little bit of overkill for us at that stage, but now it's something we want. Again, W3 schools, I like, and it says I want to replace one word with another. So it says replace the word Microsoft with W3 schools, and there you see it did the replacing. The other example has multiple replaces. So let's look at that example case. So it says it's replacing blue with red. The /G here meant global. So every time we find blue, but it is case sensitive. So it didn't make the replacement in Mr. Blue, which had a capital B, but it did replace the blue of blue house and the blue of blue car to red. So we might want that. Okay. So what are we saying? So in our code, we might want in the last name. So it's not going to occur for us in the first name, since we already chopped it down to just the first letter. So we trimmed any white space off and we just took the first letter and we made it lowercase. So we don't have that problem with any problems with the first name, but in the last name, it may be some name with a space or hyphenated or something like that. So let's take last. And what do we want to do? It was a replace. And we might want to, let's say there may be multiple spaces. So let's try slash. I'm going to do something. Well, we'll see what I can do. And see what works. Do some experimenting. So there was a slash, a space, a slash, a G. What did that example look like? Slash, space, slash, G, then comma, and then what we're replacing it with, and we'll replace it with an underscore. I like underscores. So this should, let's see what happens. So Thomas, I can't spell my own name, Thomas, there we go. Let's say my name was Smith Jones. Let's see what happens there first. And it's not working. Okay, well, this gives us a chance to check our debugging. And it's got to be that new line, right? The mistake, it was working a minute ago. We changed one thing, so that's got to be where the mistake is. And it does not understand the replace. Let's do a simpler replace of just quote space quote like that. Let's see if that works before we try the fancier global thing. Okay. And it's not liking the replace. So what am I doing wrong? Let me check against the example. It has, let's go back to the first example. That was simpler. and it was some string, and then replace, and then 2 words in parentheses. And oh, I have last. So there we go. So just a simple typo on my end. My apologies, but give us a chance to check debugging ideas again. Thomas Smith Jones 624, and there we go. Now let's try the fancier version. Of the slash space /G, and that we will try the idea there with the G is a global replace, so replace more than one space. Now that will get trimmed. That space I just made will get trimmed. Smith, Jones, Fred. Okay, so we are doing a replace of multiple spaces. We can do additional replaces. This, with the slashes here, is something known as a regular expression. So I can, the first version where I just explicitly had in quotes a space, I was replacing one string with another string. In this case, I'm using the idea of a regular expression. And I could come in here, and if I were going hog wild on regular expressions, which is an advanced topic, and I'm trying to keep it easy, I would do \s, and that would be any kind of white space. So I'm assuming that the thing that I don't want is a space, but maybe it's a tab or an end of line character or some other thing. I can also replace, I want another version of this, paste, Control V. I might also want to replace any hyphens with underscores. So if they have a hyphenated last name, I don't. So if the last name was Smith Jones Fred with hyphens, I can also get them replaced with underscores. And then I guess the last thing I want to try, getting a little too advanced here for this introductory, but let's do one more play. And the question is, what if they don't enter something? And then that brings in this concept of an if. So I'll put it here, and then we'll certainly come back to ifs another time and do fancier things. But in an if, you ask a question. And so I want to ask if first. And when I ask if it's equal to something, I use 2 equals. 2 equals, 1 equal is assigning, it's making it true. 2 equals is for when you're asking a question. And if I want to know if first is just quote, if there's nothing in there at all, then maybe I want to alert the user to the problem. Please enter a first name. That's just a little yelling that will pop up. And then I am in a function. And if I want to sort of not continue with the function, if I want to get out of the function, that is known as return. So I can just sort of say, if you don't have the first name right, then I'm just going to yell at you and get out. So what if I don't enter a first name, but I enter a last name and I enter a number? Then it will yell at me and not do anything else, not continue with the rest of that function. But then I can fix the error of my way and get the answer I want. And I could do the same thing with last and the same thing with the favorite number. That's just sort of more of the same. And so I will just leave that to you if you want to make it complete. So I think I'll end there. Thank you for your attention.